The most expensive stock in Taiwan's stock market history is not TSMC. It belongs to a company of roughly 100 people tucked into Hsinchu, selling a chip that costs less than your lunch. You have probably never heard of it, but before a single GPU can boot, in NVIDIA's racks, in Google's, in Amazon's, one of this company's chips has to wake up first. Roughly 70% of the world's servers start their day this way. This is ASPEED, the hidden monopoly inside every AI server. And the AI boom just made this quiet little chip busier than it has ever been. Every server has two brains. The big one is obvious, the CPUs and GPUs doing the actual computing. The other one never sleeps. It is called the Baseboard Management Controller, the BMC. When the main system powers off, the BMC stays awake. It switches the machine on remotely, watches temperatures, voltages, and fan speeds, recovers crashed boards, and reflashes firmware, all without a human touching the rack. Data center operators call this out-of-band management. Think of the BMC as the building superintendent living in the basement, invisible, underpaid, and holding the master keys to everything. ASPEED was founded in 2004 in Hsinchu, Taiwan. It designs these chips, TSMC manufactures them, and roughly 70% of the world's server BMCs carry its name. Storage boxes and network gear, too. If it lives in a rack, odds are ASPEED is inside. So why does one small company own 70% of anything? Because this is the kind of chip nobody wants to fight for. A BMC sells for tens of dollars inside a server that costs tens of thousands, or an AI rack that costs millions. That is far too small for giants to chase. But switching it is terrifying. The BMC touches power sequencing, thermal control, security, and remote recovery. If it fails, you lose the entire machine, and someone has to physically drive to the data center. No procurement manager gets promoted for saving $12 on the one chip that can brick the rack. And then there is software gravity. 2 decades of firmware, the open-source OpenBMC stack, the commercial packages from AMI and others, were ported, tested, and hardened on ASPEED silicon first. Each new server generation, board designers reach for the chip their firmware team already knows. It is the same boring monopoly physics this channel keeps finding. The product is small, the switching risk is enormous, and the incumbent compounds quietly for 20 years while nobody is looking. Here is where AI changes the story. A traditional pizza box server needs exactly one BMC. An AI rack is a different animal entirely. Take NVIDIA's GB300 NVL72, 72 Blackwell GPUs spread across 18 compute trays, plus 9 switch trays, plus power shelves and management silicon riding in every tray. Lenovo's rack documentation lists an ASPEED controller on each compute tray's management module. Meta's GB300 server design tells the same story. One AI rack now carries dozens of management chips where a normal rack carried a handful, and the chip itself is leveling up. The new AST2700, the industry's first BMC built on a 12-nanometer process, sells at a meaningfully higher price, and ASPEED is ramping it in 2 years instead of the usual 3. At Computex this June, the chairman shared something remarkable. The shipment forecasts customers handed him at the end of last year had doubled by January. His explanation? Agentic AI. AI that acts, instead of just chatting, is pulling server demand across the board. Goldman Sachs now models shipments growing more than 50% this year, with the premium AST2700 climbing from a 20th of shipments toward nearly half within 2 years. But the most elegant part of this story is that ASPEED does not care who wins the AI chip war. Follow the logic. If NVIDIA keeps winning, every new rack ships with ASPEED silicon riding along in its trays. If the cloud giants win instead, with Google's TPUs, Amazon's Trainium, the custom accelerators Broadcom builds, those in-house chips cost less than NVIDIA's. And ASPEED's chairman spelled out exactly what that means. Cheaper accelerators stretch the same capital budget across more servers, more BMCs. In his words, the more cloud providers spend, the more BMCs are needed. This channel has covered arms dealers before, companies that sell to every side of the war. Broadcom sells the networks. Advantest sells the testers. ASPEED sits even further upstream of the outcome because it is not betting on any compute architecture at all. x86 or ARM, GPU or custom silicon, every one of them boots the same way through a BMC. The only bet ASPEED makes is that the number of servers on Earth keeps rising. Right now, that is the safest bet in AI. Now the cracks, because at this price, the risks deserve equal airtime. First, competition is finally showing up. A Silicon Valley startup called Axiado built an AI-native management chip, security and BMC fused into one, and Gigabyte has already demonstrated it on NVIDIA MGX systems. Taiwan's Nuvoton remains the industry's second source, and China is pushing domestic alternatives. Second, the customers themselves. The open-source OpenBMC stack slowly weakens the firmware lock-in. And hyperscalers have a precedent. Amazon's Nitro project pulled server management functions into Amazon's own silicon once before. If the world's biggest server buyers ever decide this chip is strategic, they can build their own. Third, the supply chain. ASPEED is switching substrate materials in the middle of a shortage. Some shipments have already slipped into next year, and management admits margins face pressure this year. Fourth, the price of perfection. After more than doubling in a year, the stock trades at well over 100 times earnings, for what remains overwhelmingly a one-product company. Monopolies deserve premiums. This one is priced as if nothing on this list ever goes wrong. So here is the verdict. The monopoly is real. Roughly 70% share, 20 years of firmware gravity, and a product too small to attack, yet too critical to drop. That is about as clean as a moat gets. The growth is real too. Gross margins near 70%, order visibility stretching into 2027, and an AI build-out that multiplies management silicon per rack, no matter whose accelerator wins. But hold both sides honestly. On one side sits the purest picks-and-shovel story in AI. A company that profits from server count itself, indifferent to who wins the compute war. On the other, a single product line, customers powerful enough to replace it if they ever care enough, credible competition arriving for the first time in years, and a valuation that leaves no room for error. The cheapest chip in the rack is carrying the most expensive expectations in Taiwan's market. None of this is investment advice. It is a map of where the pressure sits. And for 20 years, the pressure has lost that bet against boring. If this changed how you see the inside of a server rack, subscribe. This channel walks the AI supply chain one quiet choke point at a time, from the actual semiconductor industry view. And tell me in the comments which company you want opened up next. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.